Thanks so much, Sarah. That's fab. So it's brilliant to see so many of you have decided to come back in from the garden and join us on our webinar. I went out and sat and had a drink, and it was super warm. So I'm definitely giving away all my secrets. It's been much nicer to see the sunshine, and the dreary start to the week was making me feel blah. So I wonder. Probably should have been getting out and doing a bit more exercise, but you're going to hear all about that later on. The Chamber has been obviously, like so many people, like so many of you have been doing, adapting through the last months. And we've been doing a lot of webinars and keeping as much information available to the business community locally as we possibly can. So, we have got a COVID hub like many people have, and, there's all sorts of information on that. We're still dealing a lot with inquiries. So I spent quite a bit of time yesterday talking to a business that feels like they haven't actually got a lot of guidance for what phase they fall into, how they can safely get their workforce back to work and keep up with customers who are demanding they come back to work. But, this business is not sure they've got the right guidance, how to make sure their staff feel properly supported, and also they're worried about the costs of kind of reopening, of getting it wrong. And they've been talking to the insurance companies, who's basically saying, if you haven't followed, the health advice and guidance, then it's unlikely that your policy will cover you for whatever might come down the line. So, businesses are still, although there's lots of businesses seeing lots of opportunity at the moment, and we're getting used to this is how we're working, there are still lots and lots of people really struggling. And obviously there have been announcements yesterday about schools reopening, and so every single business that's got staff with young people at schools now thinking, okay, so that's not what we thought we were going to be planning for. So right, how does that impact all of our recovery plans? So yeah, certainly keeping us busy, that's for sure. And we're, as I said, we're doing webinars, and this webinar, this slot that we do on a Wednesday, is a really important one because we've been doing a lot of business support advice and webinars, but looking after people and looking after yourself and making sure you're fit and healthy, and you're encouraging your team to stay with that mindset, and that, even that you can be encouraging and setting a good example for your friends and your family. And just, we've explored lots of different ways to support the people around us during our Wednesday sessions, and this one will be really interesting. A bit of a slight heads up on what we've got coming up next week. So our Tuesday evening session sees us do a guide to, and Tuesday evening next week is all about workforce planning. So, how do you keep up with all the rules that you need to? What should you have in place for supporting your team? Even to the situation of, have you really thought about how your workstations are all being set up? Are people working safely from where they're working from? Or as we go into the next weeks and months, and you don't know how long they're going to have to endure sitting at their dining room table, as I am, are they properly set up? And have you thought about just, the kind of well-being and the safety of your people that are then working for you remotely? So it'll be all of that and more next Tuesday evening. And on Wednesday, God, how can Wednesday next week be the 1st of July? Geez. 1st of July, our Wednesday session is all about brand you. So we have got someone joining us from Dubai. So, here the upsides to all of this technology are pretty good. So we've got somebody that really specialises in entrepreneurs and how you portray yourself, but also, how does that extend to your brand? And are you thinking about your brand and all those opportunities? Are you thinking about what you can do to develop you and your business and your brand and just make it all really consistent? So that'll be an interesting one next Wednesday. And then on Thursday, something that seems to be rapidly becoming the buzzword is green recovery. So everybody seems to be talking about, are you thinking about sustainability? Are you thinking about how to be greener as we come out of this? And I guess what we're not just meaning is, okay, I'm not going to travel about as much because, I don't really need to jump on a train to go to a meeting in Glasgow, or I'm not going to do so much kind of airplane travel. But, how are you really embedding circularity and thinking about your waste and thinking about all your processes. So we've got a few speakers looking at that next Thursday. So yeah, lots and lots of things going on. And for those of you that have maybe missed something, so again, the Chamber's been looking at where does normally our income come from? How do we support members to get the messages out? And our online news channels have been busier than ever. I certainly thought in the early days of April, will there be much news? Will people just be hunkering down and there won't be much for businesses to be shouting about and talking about? And we've seen the absolute opposite. So, lots of good news stories, but also people are sharing about what they're doing and really adapting well. So an extension of that was a digital takeover product that we launched where businesses could actually get access to sponsoring our webinars. They can get adverts on our website and branded posts and all sorts of things on our social media channels. So we don't have Kev here in person today because he ended up having to go and talk to a client. But our sponsor for today's session is the Story Edge. So those of you that haven't come across Kevin Anderson before, you should definitely track him down on LinkedIn and follow what he talks about, because he talks about what is really funny is he talks about being a professional storyteller, which if you were brought up by a mum like me, it's a bit like, oh, yeah, you shouldn't really say you're a storyteller. That's got all sorts of different connotations. But what Kev does is just use content and stories to really bring your brand to life. And it's not just testimonials and it's not just case studies, and it's just really taking care to understand what the key messages are that you might want to be talking about from your organisation and actually crafting those into the right kind of story for your audience as well. So yeah, I would definitely encourage you to kind of have a chat with Kev and see, and he's got lots of stories online, and I recorded an interview with him which we've got up on our YouTube channel that just explores a wee bit more about behind Kev and his journey, and also why he thinks telling stories is just a vital part of your marketing toolkit. So yeah, if you want to get in touch with Kev, then you can email him. It's kevin@thestoryedge.co.uk. And the instruction I have to tell you is put me please in the subject line. So, and that kind of sums up Kev. So I would encourage you to track him down and just explore that. But yeah, so that's really all from me. I'm really looking forward to today's session, and as Sarah said, it will be up on YouTube for those of you that either, I mean, I'm sure you'll be taking notes and really paying attention, but it's always nice to go, actually, I'm going to go back and have a look at that and really sort of take it back in again. So we're going to hear from John first, and then he'll hand over to Louise, and then they're going to do a bit of a double act, I think. And then Sarah has to somehow keep them under control for the Q&A. So John, once you unmute yourself and I can hear you, I'll mute and let you know.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, perfect, thank you.
Hello everyone, thanks for joining us this afternoon. I'm supposed to start with just a little bit of background about who I am. I'm a lecturer at Abertay University. I look at exercise physiology, so how the body responds to different types of exercise. Exercise is really important. It's one of these things that everyone knows what exercise is. Everyone knows it's good for us, but not everyone does it. In fact, most people don't do it. My background, or what I mainly research, is what's called high intensity training, which is essentially very short, very maximal exercise. But I'm not going to focus on that today. What I really want to do is explore exercise as a whole and why it's important for brain health rather than mental well-being. Mental well-being is kind of a woolly term that we can't really measure very well because it's done through psychological questionnaires. And you're essentially taking a hammer to look at a walnut, to open a walnut. So what tends to happen is when you give out these questionnaires, you'll get a large amount of variation in what people think you're actually asking them. So I really want to think a bit more about as the brain as a whole, because that's where mental well-being comes from. is having a healthy brain, or having good, it's not really health, but good adaptability of the brain across your lifespan. As we get older, it's also really important that we exercise as well. One of my key research areas at the moment is the role of exercise in preventing long-term brain decline in the elderly or in older adults. So stopping the onset of not necessarily Alzheimer's disease, but vascular dementia, which tends to kick in much later in older people, around about the age of 70, 75. You start to see vascular dementia starting to occur. So the longer we can keep people healthy, or keep their brains healthy, the really important thing is less interaction they'll have with medical professionals. And therefore less cost will be associated with that aging process. So exercise is actually a real cornerstone of improving overall brain function and brain health. It doesn't really matter what type of exercise you do, to some extent. There's nuances within there where certain type of exercise will produce slightly different effects than another type of exercise, but that's not really important. With the one caveat that resistance training probably isn't as good for brain health as any type of aerobic or endurance-based exercise. So when we're talking about brain health, what we're really talking about, or where the adaptations actually come from, is actually changing how your heart and blood system is working. Because if you think about the brain as an organ, it sits isolated pretty much from the rest of the body. It's fed through blood. The amount of blood that's getting delivered to the brain depends on the heart. So that's why aerobic exercise is probably the most important one, is because you get bigger cardiovascular changes or bigger heart changes from aerobic exercise than you do from resistance training. So resistance training is probably not the sort of exercise that's going to promote good brain health. So what we know is that when we do any type of aerobic based exercise, from walking right up to high intensity interval training, which I look at, is we get this positive aspect on brain health. We promote remodeling of the brain. What tends to happen is with the endurance exercise, we increase our cardiovascular capacity, our ability to do activities. We're better able to deliver oxygen around our bodies. Our blood flows freer. So we're reducing that resistance of blood flow from the heart to everywhere else in the body. And that's probably one of the most important changes that happens when you exercise, is that reduction in resistance to the transport of blood around the body, because that allows a greater oxygen delivery to the brain, which then stops sites of damage occurring. So if you don't have a good blood flow to the brain, what tends to happen is you get small sites of oxygen deficit that cause increased brain cell death at that site. And that can manifest itself in lots of different ways, depending on where in the brain that oxygen deficit's occurring. And again, with vascular dementia, that's where it's affecting memory and stuff like that, but it can affect other stuff as well. So that delivery of oxygen is really important. But the brain also gets its nutrients from the bloodstream. So the flow of blood to the brain helps to increase, good flow of blood to the brain helps to increase the brain's ability to remodel itself, because we're providing it with the energy it requires. And that energy requirement of the brain is actually really important, because part of the reason when you're sedentary, you start to feel tired quite a lot, is just because you're not delivering sufficient energy molecules to the brain. So your brain's not processing things fast enough, and you tend to feel slightly lethargic. So being sedentary tends to make you much more apathetic and lethargic than being active. So we've got this ability by increasing blood flow to the brain to increase our verve, if you like, our get up and go, our ability to feel focused and alive and ready to do stuff. And again, that's across any type of endurance-based exercise. You'll see that sort of change being shown. And the other important thing is you get what's called neurogenesis, which is we start remaking the brain. So with endurance-based exercise, you deliver a stimulus to promote the brain to remake itself. So we lose areas of damage and start repairing them. So again, exercise is a really powerful tool just to gain remodeling of the brain. Again, it's as powerful as a lot of the Parkinson's disease drugs and stuff. Exercise can be found to be as powerful in brain remodeling in Parkinson's. So it's really, really important that we stay active. Obviously, the amount you do and how hard you push yourself determines how much change you get. So when you, for example, if you start to go out walking, you've been sedentary for a long time, you start to go out walking, you'll get a lot of changes early on to that type of exercise because it's actually quite high intensity for you because you're not used to doing it. But you'll eventually plateau. And then if you want to continue improving, perhaps you don't, perhaps you're at a level of health you want, and then it's about sustaining. But if you want to improve, then you've got to change what you do and make the body uncomfortable so it adapts to it again. So that might be starting to jog, right? I'm walking now, right? I'll start to jog. And again, that move from walking to jogging can be quite high intensity when you're just starting out. But again, it plateaus and plateaus. So a lot of times you'll see people saying, I'm not getting any better. I don't feel I'm getting any better. And it's just because they're not pushing themselves out with the comfort zone. But what they're doing is maintaining what they've got. So it's really important we stay active to maintain what we've got already. It's been well established in space flight, space travel studies that head down or completely sedentary behavior leads to a rapid decline in cognitive function. So being active helps the brain to stay sharp, if you like, stay focused. For workforces, it's actually been really work-based exercise interventions have been shown to improve productivity of employees. So by making it easier for people to work or people to exercise, what they actually achieve in work goes up. So they're actually much more focused and much more productive members of teams. So for work, in any workplace, putting in some sort of capability to allow people to do exercise easy is a really powerful way to increase productivity, but also reduce days lost to sick leave and chronic conditions such as postural conditions around sitting in an office and stuff. As well as all that, we have, for the person exercising, activities or endurance-based activities have been shown to promote greater confidence. So people who are active and physical tend to have a greater confidence in their ability to do stuff and a greater confidence within themselves, which then has a knock-on effect around mild mood disorders. So people who exercise regularly tend to be less angry, tend to be less depressed, and tend to be more positive, take more positive outlook on life. All that together gives us a huge stimulus that's free or can potentially be free. It doesn't cost a lot to exercise. It doesn't have to be in a gym. And not every exercise is right for every person. And what I like to do wouldn't be what Louise likes to do. I've been running most of my life. I'm a long distance runner. That's what I enjoy. And I also enjoy martial arts. Not everyone enjoys martial arts. Not everybody enjoys long distance running. But there's other ways to exercise. There's not just one type of exercise that's important. What's important is increasing the activity level. And that then increases people's self-confidence, which then leads to improved productivity. We're all interrelated, and it's all related to this promoting good brain health. So exercise really does promote good brain health and long-term brain sustainability, which then has on massive knock-on effect as we get into our later life, into our late 70s, early 80s, where it's been well shown that people who are active, or older people who are active, have less comorbidities associated with aging. So it's really important, not just for a 20-year-old to be active, it's important across the lifespan that we remain active. Active workers are more productive, active workers are less depressed, and it's all related to that plasticity of the brain, enabling us to remodel the brain, which leads to the other thing you get with exercise is, I suppose, what people, I don't know if I'm coming to the end of my time or not, people call the exercise high. And that's all down to dopamine release. So we get, when we exercise, in the immediate aftermath, we get a massive increase in dopamine, which makes us feel good about ourselves. And we also lose serotonin, which stops us feeling tired. So we switch around the neurotransmitters, the hormones that are signaling in the brain, and we feel more lively after we've exercised, and after we get more of a sense of achievement the harder we push ourselves. So it's important that we're always, when we exercise, we're always trying to push ourselves a little bit harder than we want to. Humans tend to be quite lazy as an animal. You find yourself going, if anyone's a runner, lots of people go, I'm going to blast this run, I'm going to run at this pace, and then 10 minutes into it, they're jogging along and they're starting to think about different things or clearing their mind, which is all good, but they're not pushing themselves and they don't get such a buzz from the exercise. So it's always important that we push ourselves to stay motivated to exercise. But it's also important to find the right exercise for you, because if you don't like the exercise, you're never going to keep doing it. So regardless of the health benefits of exercise, you need to find the one that's right for you. And there's no one size fits all. It's definitely choose what you enjoy doing. That could be going up into the hills and doing walking, or it could be running on a treadmill. It's entirely up to you. Right, I'm going to hand over to Louise, because I think that's me coming to the end of my 15 minutes. I have a tendency to go over, so I'm really conscious to try and stay on track. So I'm going to mute myself. Louise, do you want to unmute yourself?
I think that's me. Can everybody hear me okay there? Yeah. Okay, thank you, John. John, that was great. Yeah, and I wasn't sure how you were going to go with your timing. So just by way of explanation, John and I know each other from my attendance at Aberdeen University. John was my very obviously fantastic lecturer. Just to clear that up if anybody had any doubt. No, I think what you will find as I speak, I will talk from a personal perspective, and I will talk about some of those woolly terms that John, as a scientist and an objective scientist, doesn't really like. And I had forgotten this part from being at university. I remembered that it all came flooding back to me as he started mentioning this. But what you will see is that as I talk, sorry, I'm just pointing down because I have just a couple of notes on things that I really want to highlight for you all. What you will see, just from listening to John's talk there, super interesting points coming up, and that actually the kind of more subjective stuff, the feelings, the emotions, actually all ties back into the science anyway, all right? And so it's not so dissimilar and unconnected, if you like. By way of introduction, my name is Louise Johnston. For anybody that doesn't know me, I am a personal trainer based here in Dundee. Louise's PT for you. I work predominantly with females, and people tend to call me a bit of an adventurer. I'm a bit uncomfortable with that, but I tend to go and do what others would call, and I will use, crazy challenges. So the reason I'm kind of speaking is more to kind of reflect on my own experiences through mental health and well-being, there's that word, and kind of utilising physical activity and exercise by way of managing my mental health. I would say I experience depression, anxiety mainly now, but in the past there has been other kind of coexisting kind of mental health conditions that have kind of fluctuated in and out there, which I now have, I would say, control over. But I prefer to experience rather than suffer from. You know, I feel like that's a very different word, very different concept in terms of how I explain and describe what I feel myself, rather than suffer from. So that's like something that's put on you, whereas experience is something that actually, I guess for me, it's something that kind of happens and I can then deal with that. Depression and anxiety are the ones that we probably most commonly talk about. From a historical perspective, I have family members who have schizophrenia, and moving down more into probably mild mood disorders. I have now suffered from or experienced depression and anxiety for longer than I haven't, unfortunately. And mine started way back in probably secondary school, early secondary school, but really became evident late secondary school. You know, different challenges pop up in your life as you're kind of going through those teenage years, and on a personal level as well, which really challenged me and kind of brought everything to the fore, I guess. But moving on from there, I found in those early years it was very difficult to understand, to manage, to deal with what I was experiencing, because I also had a lot of personal and family stuff going on that it was adding to that kind of list of challenges, I guess, that I was experiencing. You know, family members going through their own difficulties, which then affected my perception of different things going on and what I perceived to be good, bad, healthy, not healthy, those kinds of things. But what I will say is throughout my whole life, I've been very fortunate to be exposed to physical activity and exercise. So my dad was a footballer. Here's a wee fact for you. He actually got a trial with Newcastle United as a goalkeeper, but at the time he was too short. But I hear that since then they have had a shorter goalkeeper, so he had a disservice there. But he was my main kind of exposure to physical activity and exercise. You know, we used to go see him with my granddad on those pitches in Leven on a Sunday. I think it was a Sunday morning or a Saturday morning. You know, and then from there I kind of wanted to be involved in sport throughout. I was quite a sporty kid. Wanted to be dirty in the garden all the time, you know, so I was one of those. And throughout school, I kind of veered towards exercise as my coping mechanism. It was something I felt I had a sense of achievement in. You know, for some reason, if I didn't feel I was good at a skill within PE classes, for example, I would knuckle down and I would 100% want to conquer that skill. You know, and that gave me that sense of achievement, that self-confidence, which then kind of translated into other subjects that I was taking on. And I guess from there, I'll then jump up to more present time. So for the last, you know, and on and off throughout that time, I have actually utilised medication. Sometimes I have, sometimes I haven't. There has been dips in my physical activity and exercise participation, and there has been super increases, you know, sharp increases when that would come to the fore. I went through some difficult times at uni. Actually, I was at uni before Abertay, down in Wales, and when I was at Abertay as well. And I think it's really important to recognise if you have support available. Now, throughout my life, I've never really felt I've had a great level of support to help deal with my mental health conditions. I've had help from professionals. Sometimes comments have been positive, sometimes they've been biased and unhelpful. You know, and I think we're often exposed to different levels of bias or discrimination, for want of a better word. If I could utilise my experience at Abertay, for example, I sensed and I felt that I got a massive amount of support when I was studying there, particularly from my lecturers, as it were, and also from the extended kind of processes that were in place at Abertay to support students at the time. I found them to be just fantastic, I have to say. And I always speak really quite highly of the support I received at Abertay. You know, the kind of people were willing to listen and acknowledge where you were at and what you needed, and then help you to find solutions. You know, it was never often that I felt like I had some people telling me what to do, which is important, because often people with mental health conditions, we just want to be heard. That is the most important thing, and listened to. You know, given the opportunity to speak through where we're at, because sometimes just speaking it through and acknowledging where you're at, actually that makes you feel so much better instantly. Now, not always, but sometimes that's enough. Okay, and so providing that space without feeling like you have to fix anything is actually one of the most important things that actually every single one of us can do, is just listen. You know, and in fact, listening is the most important tool when we talk about communication. You know, laterally, the last kind of 5 or 6 years, I've been on a bit of a journey where I have become progressively more open about my own experiences of mental health, the positive and the negative. But actually, I have to say, I've probably not been exposed to as much discrimination as other people. I feel like my experiences and my exposure has been, on the whole, positive. And I'm really thankful for that, because I know that's not everybody's experience. But I am also very, how shall we say, very vocal about the fact that if you have nothing positive to say, you will either be removed from my social media pages, or I won't expose myself to that, because I know that that's not helpful for me. You know, so sometimes another part of this is actually knowing your own boundaries and being able to say no at the right time, but saying yes at, you know, at other times. So at this last 5 or 6 years, I started to take on charity events to raise money for mental health charities, mainly locally based in Dundee. And that first one actually came about because one of my clients said to me, "Louise, you should do this for a charity." And at the time I was a budding runner. I was building up, and this was a massive challenge for me. 100-mile run over, I think, 4 or 5 days. I can't actually remember how many days it was. Camping in between. We were running into a storm. It was awful. But it was the best experience ever, you know. And I would say that endurance events, John might understand this as well, and any runners, I saw the list for today, and I recognise a lot of runners' names there. Running is very like life. You know, there's ups, there's downs, there's challenges. You've got to overcome obstacles. It makes you, being active, as John highlighted, makes you very durable. You come up against those obstacles and you find ways to overcome them often. You know, running a 5K is hard. You find out more training perspectives and you try and implement them in your training. You don't give up. You might give up once or twice, but you've learned something from them and you'll return, okay? Then moved on to, and I'm not really sure how I got from a 100-mile run around the Cotswolds to the Marathon des Sables in 2016. I'm not really sure how I got from one to the other, because they're both extremely different in the extreme terms. For anybody that doesn't know, the Marathon des Sables is a 156-mile run through the Sahara Desert, carrying all of your kit. Mine amounted to about 12 kilos on day one, and I can guarantee you it was not 12 kilos by the end of that week. 1, my food had been eaten, and 2, I ditched everything by the end of day one that I had thought would maybe come in handy. They got binned, including my mate's leggings. Sorry about that. You know, and that was, anybody who asks me about that, I do use the word, it was hell. But I will return because I have unfinished business. And there's that determination, there's that stubbornness to improve, to be better. The Marathon des Sables was again for a local charity DAMH, that's Dundee Association for Mental Health. I think they are now Wellbeing Works. And again, moving on from that, I then took on the West Highland Way, which is a 95-mile race that you do. You have 35 hours, I think, is the total to do it in, and it's basically non-stop, or you manage your time with a support crew during that time to overcome and to basically manage your body and yourself through that period. I then set up, I'm just very aware of my time, so it might seem like I'm rushing a little bit, but I want to just give you a perspective of what I've done, where I've been. I then decided, in the same year as I took on West Highland Way, in 2017, I set up Dundee Mental Health Awareness Week, Heart to Heart, with some people who jumped in to help. They were fantastic. But I set that up because at that time I decided I wasn't doing any more fundraising. You'll understand why I made that face in a second. Heart to Heart grew arms and legs it just blew my mind. The number of people that got involved was just phenomenal. We got great local exposure. It was, in my eyes, it was meant to be this small little thing, you know, that maybe a few folk would get involved in, and maybe I could grow it from there. Well, yeah, it did the opposite of that. And actually what happened is my initial idea to put on a kind of exhibition that I thought needed a platform, well, it just turned into a huge exhibition week. I think I was thinking a weekend, but we had over 900 masks submitted to go on to Slessor Gardens, with people demonstrating on those masks their own experiences of mental health conditions, or it could have been their personal experience, it could have been their experience being a carer, or just being aware of the different perspectives on mental health and well-being. So, you know, it didn't have to be from an illness perspective, it could literally be from what looks like mental health for them. And the variance in just the creativeness that came out of that was just, yeah, it actually fills me up quite a lot of emotion to think about what that looked like back then. And it was amazing. Unfortunately, not something I've been able to repeat, because actually it did drain me from a mental health perspective. It took a lot out of me, which was good, but also not so great for me. From my perspective, I didn't manage my mental health so well during that time, because, you know, I was doing it for other people and I put myself out there for that. My upcoming challenge is called, it was meant to be this year, so I should have been running right now. What are we on, the 24th of June? I think I would be in 24th of June. I'd be round about Denmark, I think, at this moment in time. Coming towards the end of Germany, maybe Denmark. And you'll understand in a second. So it's now called #2021 Run North Sea. I will run 3,455.5 miles, approximately, over 100 days, around the North Sea cycle route. This is the largest cycle route in Europe, and I will start from Dundee, naturally. I'll run down the east coast of the UK, cross over at Harwich to the Netherlands, run up the west coast of the Netherlands, Germany, Denmark, Sweden, Norway, fly back across from Norway to Aberdeen, then get a lift to the top of the mainland and run back down to Dundee. Finished. And that is for SAMH. That is on a slightly larger scale. SAMH has been selected because it is the Scottish mental health charity. They work on a more policy level and apply to all of us. You know, it's every single person. And I really think, you know, I think John touched on this, we have a responsibility as individuals to look after our mental health. That includes employers and employees. You as a person have a responsibility both to yourself, but to your community to look after your mental health. Because if we improve our own mental health, if we all took responsibility for that, imagine what would happen to the community, what would happen to, you know, Scotland as a nation in terms of taking a hold of our mental health and really pushing those positive aspects. For example, working in the workplace, putting processes in place to support people, starting small. John touched on this. Start small. One step is all it needs to start something. One small step, and then you take another small step. And whatever that size of that step is for you, that's all that matters. Because small steps build up into big things if you do them consistently enough. Okay? And it doesn't have to be improved every single day or every week. You build on it slowly and gradually in a progressive way. Again, John highlighted the importance of selecting activities which are both fun and enjoyable. Because essentially, if you don't select that fun and enjoyable activity, you're not going to stick at it. And the best thing for anybody isn't one type of exercise, as John said. It's not one level of exercise. It's whatever is going to make you stick. It's like a diet. There is no one diet for everybody. There is no one way of eating for everybody. It's whatever works for you and you can consistently stick with that is the most important aspect of it. And looking at fun and enjoyable and perhaps including other people and making it more sociable is a way for you. Or perhaps you like to also do it more as an individual style and get in your own headspace. Exercise can sometimes replicate the processes that happen in exercise from a physiological perspective, and John might be able to come into this, can sometimes replicate the feelings that we get when perhaps we're having anxiety attack or a panic attack. But it's being able to differentiate. This is something I talk to my clients about quite a lot. It's being able to say, okay, this is a natural reaction to exercise. My heart rate will go up. My breathing rate will go up. Is there anything in the surrounding which is making me feel afraid or stimulating these anxiety feelings? Or is it just similar? I say just very loosely. I'm not dismissing that feeling in any way. Or is there a bit of confusion about what that feels like? The first few times, it will be confusing. But keep your mind open to the fact that it could just be your body reacting physiologically to the exercise demands that you're now placing on it. All right, and the only way to get improvement and to get the intensity that John highlighted is to experience some of those symptoms. Perhaps you can take somebody with you who can help relax you and talk you through that process. That's been helpful for some of my own clients, you know, but it could be a friend, it could be anybody, somebody from your running group, you know. Or I think John highlighted martial arts, maybe it's somebody, you know, you trust in the martial arts group or your rugby team. I used to be a rugby player, you know, it could be anybody. Working on a growth mindset, you know, that building that resilience, challenging yourself in small ways so that you can see, I can do this. The more often you remind yourself that you can take on challenges and you can do this, the easier it becomes to take on more challenges. The less we take on challenges and the more we focus on the negative, the easier it becomes to fall into that cycle. So it works both ways. Not easy, but again, consistent, repeated action is the way that we can improve things. John, I would be interested to hear your perspective on what's coming out in terms of green space, in terms of, you know, impact, in terms of exercise. I don't know if you perhaps look at this, but exercise prescription through green space, because I know that's a big area at the moment.
There is a big thing about green space. There's a lot of evidence that being outdoors, obviously not great in Scotland because we don't really have the weather for it, but being outdoors in a green environment improves mental well-being. Again, that's not for everyone. I don't really like nature. I quite like running in cities and in architecture. I find looking at buildings quite rewarding.
Yeah.
So green space doesn't necessarily mean has to be outside in the hills or outside in I think it's more about being outside in an environment that you feel safe in. And I think that's what we mean when we talk about green space, the importance of green space. And sometimes that doesn't come into local planning very well.
Yes, I think it's very much it's impacted by where you live. For example, in lockdown, I'm really lucky. I live just along from Swanee Ponds, so I quite like nature. I like to run out in the trails. Running in cities for me is more of a means to an end to get me to the trails. But it's like you say, it's different perspectives, and it's whatever works for you, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. I'm actually going to pick up on a point that you made about your crazy events. I'm just wondering how important you think doing these events or having the goal of these events has been in enabling you to maintain a more consistent mental health across sort of the last 7 to 8 years.
Yeah, God, that's a good question. So I know upon reflection from myself, self-awareness, looking back over my life, if it were, just progressively as I've become more open about mental health, I found that I work best off huge goals. And that's 100% not for everybody, because for a lot of people that's too scary. But even once I set, so when I first started running, I only started running because I got picked up an injury at rugby, a long-term injury. So when I first started running, I hated running. I am not a runner. That's what I would say. I'm not a runner. I was disgusted if anybody called me a runner, because I was a team player. But I knew right then, if I wanted to commit to something that was both beneficial and super important for my mental health, from an exercise and physical activity perspective, if I needed to just bear through that initial stage where I knew eventually I could build into it, and that actually getting out on the trails was probably the way for me, because I kind of like the nature side of things. I knew that if I set a big goal, actually I would commit to it. So my first ever goal was to run the West Highland Way race in 24 hours. It took me a few years to get there, because I kind of got distracted with other things, and I haven't quite hit the 24 hours yet, because again I picked up a niggle through the West Highland Way. But I think the importance in terms of having the big goal for me as an individual is huge. I really I get excited, but I'm also a little bit afraid of those challenges. Like everybody, just because you set a big goal, and I truly believe when I set those goals that I will achieve them one way or another, I'm still a bit afraid. I'm still have that fear of failing, like a lot of people do when we take on those big challenges. But I kind of, it's remembering that people don't achieve these challenges because they're not afraid. They achieve them in spite of, And I think it's important that people realize that everybody has a bit of fear. Everybody has a bit of, fear of failing, letting other people down. And I think actually having the charities has really helped my consistency and just having other people to answer to, like that level of accountability. So it's been super important in terms of relevance for me. But on the other side of things, I know that setting big goals like that is not always the way to go for everybody.
There's a question, Louisa, I think you might be useful for answering this one.
Right, okay. Sorry.
I was just about to say we do have a couple of questions in the chat there. Arwa, I don't know if you're able to unmute yourself and actually come in and ask. I guess you were asking John some specific questions, but the first one's maybe relevant to both of them. If you're not able to unmute, then that's fine. I'll ask them for you.
No, that's all right. Hi, everybody. Thank you. That was such an informative talk. Well, the first question, I wasn't sure whether it's for Louise or for John, but how do you encourage people who struggle with chronic depression to start exercising, especially if they are not normally active, and hopefully involve that in their routine?
Okay, that's a tough one. John, do you want to go first, or?
I think it's about probably setting goals, small goals, small steps that can be achieved, so you can develop that sense of achievement of actually completing something. Whether that's run as fast as you can between two lampposts, and then build it up and build it up. So it's always about, as Louise was saying, about baby steps. Each step leads on to the next. So it's about not putting, for some people, having huge goals like Louise sets, like I'm going to run around the North Sea of Europe. That would be quite daunting for somebody starting out. So it's about creating those small steps that people can achieve, and hopefully try and make it fun. Yeah. Take away the PE class. A lot of people have bad experience of PE from school. So it's about trying to overcome that initial skepticism about exercise isn't for me.
Yeah, I would. So for me, chronic depression is really hard. I still have days where I struggle. I have to make a choice whether I get out of bed or not. And sometimes I do and sometimes I don't. So I think, first of all, with chronic depression, it's about celebrating small successes. So like, if getting out of bed is your win for the day, acknowledge that. If opening your curtains and going back to bed is the win for the day, again, acknowledge it. And it's, you know, when you're in that, it's very difficult to turn that around. But when you have periods where it's a little bit lighter, you know, things are a bit brighter, I think, like John says, it's coming back to not that kind of PE style or that idea of what people associate perhaps with exercise. It's perhaps talking more from a physical activity perspective. So it's changing the language sometimes, because then that comes away from PE, which, as John said, lots of people don't have great experiences with or just don't have experience of. So finding out what they maybe did as a kid that was fun, you know, like often people like to go back to their bikes because that was a fun thing to do as a child. Or perhaps it's going swimming, or they'd love to be able to go swimming, but they don't have the confidence just now. So it's like, what small steps do we need to take in order to get to the swimming pool? You know, or perhaps it's walking around the nature park. But, you know, often for those with chronic depression, even just walking, you know, a low level of walking will give a sense of achievement because maybe they're not doing enough at the moment. Does that help answer your question, Arwa?
Yes, very much. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Oh, I can't hear you.
Sorry, I know. Sorry, I've got screaming teenagers in the background, which is why I mute myself. They're playing with the kitten, seemingly. Yeah, sorry, Arwa, I know you had a couple of questions for John as well, so I don't know if you want to stay on.
Yeah, I don't mind. I was just thinking if you want to go by the sequence, but that's fine. So 2 questions for John. The first one, I know this is a very big question. It has a lot of elements into it, but how much of aerobic exercise is enough for brain plasticity? And there's another one. Is there ever a too much amount of exercise for people experiencing bipolar mania?
For exercise, what's the minimum amount required for brain plasticity probably still isn't known as such. It's a combination of time versus intensity. So the more intense the exercise is, the less amount of it you have to do. So, for example, with high intensity training, 2 sessions per week is enough to promote brain. 2 sessions lasting 10 minutes each is enough to promote brain plasticity. But with traditional running, you might need 4 sessions a week of about 30 minutes. So it's different because the intensity levels are different. Intensity seems to be a really important component of how little we need to do. The more intense it is, the less of it. So again, when you go down to really low intensity exercise like walking, you maybe need to be walking 6 to 7 days a week to be promoting that brain plasticity. Can you have too much exercise? Yes. For bipolar, I'm not sure, because a lot of the exercise responses in mental health conditions get lost because of medication. So there's a counterbalance between the effects of exercise and the effects of the drugs people are taking. Generally, it's for recommendations that are similar to general population, but there's no real studies showing that that's enough in something like chronic bipolar disorder. But for any type of exercise, the more you do, the more risk you have of injuring yourself. So, for example, for running, people who run 100 miles a week tend to be more prone to shin splints and Achilles knee injuries, hip injuries, than somebody who runs 50 miles a week. So, again, for somebody with a bipolar disorder, it will be exactly the same. The more exercise they do, the more risk they have of injuring themselves. If they get injured, they're more likely to have a bigger crash, so to speak, because they're no longer able to do that exercise.
Can I jump in on that just for 1 second? Sorry, Arwa.
That's all right.
So I think you also mentioned like the bipolar mania part.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, is that right? Yeah.
Yes.
So like the only thing that I would add to John, because John's obviously very up to date with the research, is just more. It would be a case of maybe managing the type of exercise that you chose during a mania phase, because obviously, if you're taking on maybe the higher intensity stuff during that phase, it could kind of, you could mix up what you're feeling from the high intensity. It could just amplify things a little bit. So sometimes maybe it's more exercise choice as opposed to too much, too little, during those different phases.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Leslie Ann, I know you've got a question for each of our speakers. If you're able to unmute, come in and ask them.
Okay, so recently I've been interested in the effects. This is for John. The effects of cold water, and I'm wondering, people say immersing yourself in cold water has an effect on the brain. Does it or doesn't it? And if it does, what does it do?
I haven't seen anything. The thing that happens when you immerse yourself in cold water is you reduce blood flow to peripheral areas, so you blood flow becomes much more internal to try and maintain core temperature. And again, when you come out, you do get a bigger flow of blood away, so potentially that cold water immersion could lead to a greater flow to the brain in the aftermath of the immersion, but I haven't actually seen anything suggesting in the scientific literature it suggests that's a way to do anything.
I'm seeing Louise shaking her head here. Louise?
No, I would agree with John, because I'm actually doing my level 4 diploma for exercise for those with mental health conditions, and that is what's coming out as well. I would agree with John that there isn't actually much evidence behind these, I'll call them claims just because they're just statements, but actually a lot of people do enjoy it. So, sometimes the science has to catch up with what people sometimes the science has to catch up, or has to happen after, once an experience or a thought has started to be produced. The research has to take place still. So it doesn't mean to say it doesn't benefit, but it also doesn't mean to say it does,
Okay, so it's not really been researched very much.
No. If you find it works for you, then by all means.
Yeah.
I'm only going to endure it if it's helpful. And it kind of ties in a wee bit with the question that I wanted to ask Louise. Yes. And it was like, if you're using exercise for mental health and you become injured, then it's nosedive time. So I'm not running well just now at all. I've had all kinds of bits and pieces. So I've headed to the cold water.
Nice.
And now here it maybe or maybe doesn't work. But I think that's a real key thing. I know a number of people that exercise for mental health issues and then become injured. And I'm guessing you talked a little bit about you had a rugby injury.
Yes.
How do you manage that? Because it's almost like a lemming running off the edge of a cliff.
Yes. Right, there's lots of aspects to this. How long is a piece of string?
Yeah, okay.
But so over the years, I think, let's come back to the very basic one where a lot of people say, oh, you shouldn't be active because it causes injuries, but actually the benefits can outweigh the risks. It's about evaluating that risk, and I think, it's as you progress. So, John had mentioned if you run 100 miles a week, you're more prone to certain injuries. I would kind of come back to that. And John is right, obviously, because you're increasing your load on your body. But I would say you can mediate a lot of things by actually ticking a lot of the boxes which people don't do. So, for example, sleep quality, looking at your overall training load or your stress load, your nutrition, your hydration, stress management, all of these things place a load on the body. So if you're like, so for example, and I know I'll come back to my own personal experience in a second, so I'm probably talking more generalised at the moment, but if your sleep quality is poor, which we know is to be very important, I think, John, but I think there is substantial science behind that now.
Yeah.
If your sleep quality is poor, say, and your nutrition is maybe low to medium on a scale of 1 to 5, say, but your training load is 5, and you know your stress management is really poor, and that's down. So if you've got all these, you know, where you're not putting into the bucket of energy, but you're taking out lots, then you're going to move towards that injury risk. So for me, it's a lot about the mediating factors that I've just listed for you. So coming back to that, that's like your sleep quality, which can include naps, by the way, and naps have been shown to have a really positive influence. The reason I emphasise naps is I love a nap. But naps have been shown, I think I'm right, John, in saying improving cognitive performance and also energy levels. So, for example, I think it was done in people who maybe exercised very early in the morning, and it impacted on their sleep, often swimmers, actually. I think probably the study I've looked at has been mainly swimmers, but, you know, and they had a nap later on in the day, which fitted with the training schedule, and actually what was found was their cognitive performance improved, but also so did their performance in their secondary training session. So sleep is massively important, and there's some really good books out there as well that kind of cover this. I actually have one on my bookshelf, but I can't remember the name or the author right now. But if that's something that is of interest, I can grab that and I could share that with Sarah. Looking at your overall training load, so for the body, stress is stress. It doesn't differentiate between good stress and bad stress. So what we mentally label as good stress, we're thinking, oh yeah, let's get more of that in. But if your overall load of stress is super high, it's all just stress for the body reacts in the same way. So it's about managing, that's why stress management is one of those mediating factors. We all need to stress manage, irrespective of whether you're someone who maybe has a mental health condition or doesn't, you know, because we all have stress in our life and varying amounts of positive and negative ones, or what we perceive to be positive and negative. Nutrition is massive. I think, I don't know where you are, John, with this, but you know, the impact of gut health on mental health.
Yeah, there's lots of evidence coming out now about
yeah, that's starting to be a more prevalent area of research. So, you know, your nutrition and your diet is just extremely important. Hydration levels. So basically what I've just summarised is looking after yourself. But lots of people find it really hard to do.
It's recovery. What Louise is talking about is recovery. Yes. That ability to allow your body to recover from what you've done. You can do 100 miles a week and not get injured, but you've got to allow sufficient recovery. It's one of the reasons why Alex Ferguson used to get so mad about his players going and playing golf in the afternoon after a football training session. The reason they had the afternoon off was to recover. That meant doing nothing for Alex Ferguson. That meant resting. But his players were going and playing golf, and he didn't like that.
Yeah.
So recovery is actually really key, especially when you've got that high training load.
Yeah. So coming back to my own personal, sorry, I kind of went off on a tangent there. Apologies for that. But so I actually have had a lot of injuries, mainly from running. Like I played rugby, and I got much less impactful injuries, except for this chronic one, than I ever have. You know, much less compared to running. Which is just like, what is that all about? Everybody expects the contact sport to be the worst, but it's not in my experience. And actually, you know, if you look at injury risk levels, it's not the highest. Cheerleading is, or it was. I think, John, you might bet me on that.
It depends what injury you're looking at. Trampolining is particularly bad.
Yes, so there you go. Watch out for trampolining, right, guys? So I picked up that I have a nerve damage to my lower right leg. So it might seem like a daft thing to start running. But my way of coping, at that time, I was at risk of never being active again when that got diagnosed. I had to wait a year to see if it would improve because the nerve recovers at such a slow rate. It's literally, I think it's a millimetre a day. Is that right, John? Give or take.
Give or take, yeah.
Yeah, it's very small. So they were saying if in a year things haven't improved, well, you'll know. Not very helpful. And at that time, I was desperate, and I did. You're right. You do go on a deep dive, and that was a really tough time because, you know, as a personal trainer, exercise is my life, it's my my livelihood, but it's also I knew from my whole life it's how I cope, if you like, and stress manage. So what do you do when you're injured? You find other ways. And that's where the growth mindset comes in, I think. Growth mindset is the very buzzword at the moment. It's taught, like I go into schools and speak about this a lot, because it is so connected with the values that you take from being active. You know, we tend to be a group of people who do not give up. You know, yes, we get frustrated at injury, but it's okay to acknowledge that. I think sometimes we try and fight through all these emotions and how we feel and stuff like that, but sometimes it's just acknowledge that, yes, I'm frustrated, and it's okay to be frustrated because this is a rubbish situation, you know. Most recently, I ruptured a ligament in my ankle. What year are we on? 2020. Oh my goodness, I've lost my year. So in 2019, I ruptured a ligament in my ankle in the summer, the worst time to get injured. And I was out. I couldn't run for about 4 months, and I had to get a boot for a little while. It was, and I now have to run with support. The year before that, I had a stress fracture in my heel, same leg, and I was out for I think 6 months. And just before I learned about that, I got knocked off my bike by a car. So I've hurt both legs, unfortunately. That's just bad luck.
I'm going to touch wood because I've never been injured running. Yes.
I cannot believe that. Oh my goodness. John, we need to spend a bit of time together and have some discussions. But what I will say is often when my mental health is poor, my nutrition is poor. And I am quite vocal and open about this. And when I speak to medical professionals, you know, I'm open about that this is a problem. Because if my nutrition is poor, how do I get the nutrients to recover? How do I get the nutrients to nourish my body and allow both my head and my body to be the best it can be and look after me, you know? But I am very vocal about that. And I do tell people that so that they can say, right, Louise, you know, even my physio knows when to step up and say, Louise, what's going on? You know, so I make sure I have a good team around me that know me. I'm very lucky to have worked with the same physio for over 10 years now. And in fact, I think they're members of the chamber, HEAL, and I think they ran HEAL Physiotherapy. I think they ran a session for you guys at one point, or they did a session with you, Sarah.
Possibly, yeah.
Yeah. So having a good quality team and people you trust is important because they're great to bounce off. So they know my mental health perspective and they know where I'm at with that. So they make sure that there is always something I can do. And I think sometimes that's where maybe reaching out to other people, you can find, if you're not sure of what else you can do or how to progress from where you're at or to stop the recurrence of injury, that's where maybe asking somebody outside of the situation is good because they can sometimes see it from a completely different perspective because you're stuck in it. And I guess I used the time, one, to cross-train. So when I ruptured my ankle, I was allowed to cycle as long as I had no pain. And actually, when I returned to running very slowly, because I had maintained such a high level of cycling, I actually managed to get back up to a half marathon within 4 weeks. But that's because I managed to cross-train. I was the best patient you have ever seen in your life. I ticked every box, but what I also had, which I was meant to be away on this year, which was called #2020 Run North Sea. So I was meant to leave on the 2nd of May, you know, so I had other people dependent on me to make sure I was where I needed to be at, which was under question. You know, I put over a year of planning already into this, so I was invested. So I think, you know, the cross-training is important when you're injured because if you're so dependent on physical activity as I am, it's about finding another way and taking lessons from previous examples. Like, so looking back, thinking what worked, what didn't work, and I have to write things down so it's black and white. You know, I have to take it out of my head. I can't just think, well, that worked and this worked. I have to literally write. I have to get my bit of paper and I have to write whys, and I have to write it down, what pros and cons. But also then I have to remember that maybe it didn't work then, but I could try it now. You know, so it's not always. Just because something didn't work previously doesn't mean I wouldn't dismiss it. I would go back to it and say, would that maybe work in this scenario? You know, because every scenario has its differences, even if they're tiny. I also take the time so when I'm full on training, I actually don't spend a massive amount of time with friends. So they know that when I've got a big goal coming up that they won't see much of me. However, I take advantage of, say, what we would call deload weeks, or down weeks. I take advantage of those, but I also take advantage of injury times, or where I don't have a massive goal in the pipeline. So at the moment I'm in a bit, like all of us, we're in a bit of a transition phase. So while I am training hard, I'm also making time for friends, because those are the guys that get me through all of this. They're the guys that I can rely on, and they know that when I'm training hard, yeah, I step back, but I'm always there. If somebody needed a friend, I would 100% be there. But they know that my focus has just shifted a little bit. So I make sure I have a small group of friends that I trust implicitly, that I would go to and be very open with. I really take a lot from leading by example. So I'm very open about my current situation and where I'm at. So I can express that, and I don't feel like I need to keep it in. And that whole idea of being the best example I can be means that actually I try to be the best I can be, like with my nutrition, with my sleep, with the load management, and with all the things that I said, and I really believe in that leading by example, and I know my clients see me as a human because I'm vocal when things are not going well. I acknowledge those challenges that we face, because life is a bit of a roller coaster, and I think people are even calling just now a corona coaster. That's one of the phrases I've heard. Does that make me hip?
Definitely.
Thanks. But it's acknowledging challenges, because to be honest with you, I hate water, right? So I'm very impressed that you're going cold water. I am terrified. But I think, like water is a great analogy. If you ever watch a stream running, just stand and watch it. Look at the rocks that it has carved space into, and the circles and the indentations. That didn't happen in one day. Water is persistent, and it's determined in its actions. If it doesn't find a way one day, it tries. It maneuvers into spaces. It creates bigger spaces. And it finds a way to its destination. And it is ongoing, and it is relentless. Those are some words that people describe me with. But it's looking around you, and sometimes looking for inspiration there. That's where actually probably John and I differ in terms of where we take inspiration and enjoyment from in a run, and that's okay. It doesn't mean one of us is right and one of us is wrong. It just means we're different. So actually I sometimes think Leslie Ann, I sometimes think actually speaking to lots of different people during these times is good. I read lots of books, both autobiographies and kind of inspirational biographies. I take time to step outside my comfort zone a little bit and just challenge myself to read different things, or listen to podcasts is a good one, because these are things I don't actually have a lot of time for, because I spend most of my time working or training, which makes me sound a lot different to people, but actually it's just where I choose to place my focus. I think that is a long-winded way of answering your question a little bit.
No, but I think that was brilliant. I think the sleep and the nutrition are things that, even as a counsellor, when somebody comes and they sit in front of you, yes, then the first thing you ask is, how are you sleeping? How are you eating? Even before you start to say, why have you come here and what's your issue? Yeah. So I think that's really key. So thanks for that. And John, maybe you need to go and check out cold water and brain plasticity.
Yes.
I'll watch
sure there's a study there.
Paper that you're going to write.
I'm not sure people will enjoy doing it.
I have this kind of nutty thing that I think if I keep going in, at some point it might get warmer.
You're very, very brave, Leslie Ann. Like Louise, I do not like water. A shower's about as far as I will get to on water. But yeah, I mean, sleep and nutrition, it's really, really key. And we've actually done 2 sessions previously within this series on a Wednesday, one covering sleep and one covering nutrition as well. So it's very, very key to not just kind of exercise, but mental health as well. I'm conscious of time. I'm sure we could, we could probably carry on the conversation for the next 2 or 3 hours. I personally could, but appreciate that people do have kind of other commitments today. So just want to say thanks very much to Louise and John for joining us.
Yeah.
Great session. And yeah, we hope to see people real soon on some more of our webinars.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
guys.
Yeah.
See you later. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.